Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Employment Committee. I think we've had some apologies which have been noted. You've already seen the terms of reference for the forthcoming year. I will be remaining as chair and Councillor Amy White will be vice chair. Thank you. Has everybody had an opportunity to look at the minutes? I'll second those minutes, thank you. We don't appear to have any questions from the public, so we will now move on to item 6, which is the revised corporate leadership structure proposals, and Angela's going to introduce that.
Thank you. Okay, so this report sets out a proposal around the corporate leadership structure and a realignment of portfolios. The recommendation is that committee recommends the proposals to council for approval and or for noting as appropriate. So I'll just talk a little bit about the proposals in terms of the background. So some of the background to change the senior leadership structural arrangements, they were last revised in July 2018. When a set of permanent and interim appointments were put in place to the corporate leadership team. And that was following the departure of the Chief Executive, the Corporate Director for Transformation and Resources, and the Corporate Director for Children and Families and Wellbeing, who held both statutory roles for adult services and children's services at that time. So under those arrangements in 2018, the Children, Families and Wellbeing portfolio was split into 2 statutory functions as an interim measure and to assess the viability of that model. So the roles of a Corporate Director for Adult Services, which is a statutory DAS role, and the Corporate Director of Children and Families, which is the statutory DCS, which is the Director of Children's Services and the Director of Adult Social Services. Those 2 roles were then put in place. So we made some interim appointments internally to both of those roles for a temporary period of time under the succession policy. And those salary levels were reflective of that development period at the time. So also around about that time, or just before that, we already had an interim arrangement in place for a corporate director role for commissioning. And that was recruited to on a 12-month basis on NHS terms and conditions. So it's funded jointly with NHS Trafford CCG. So alongside that role, the post holder also successfully took on the CCG's accountable officer for a temporary period of time. So I think, following the permanent appointment of the Chief Executive in February and the permanent appointment to the CCG's accountable officer in January this year, revised corporate leadership proposals are now being put forward. So I think the first priority and the main focus of the revision has been to put permanent leadership arrangements in place in both the adult services and the children and families directorates, and to establish new arrangements to build on, the work that we did in the health and social care commissioning work, which has really progressed well over the last year. So I think there's a variety of reasons, not least the impending financial challenge that the council's facing from 2020 onwards, and the recent Ofsted inspection outcome. I think it's essential that we put some stability in our corporate leadership team, and especially in those key services. So the first proposal is to disestablish the corporate director commissioning posts. So this proposal reduces the number of corporate director posts from 7 to 6. The proposal introduces a new role of a director for integrated health and social care strategy, funded jointly by NHS CCG and the council. And it reports into, as I say, it has a joint reporting line into the Corporate Director for Adults and Wellbeing. The proposal there is to redesignate that Corporate Director portfolio. I'll talk a little bit about that later on, and also to report into the Accountable Officer of the CCG. So as I said, it's funded jointly, and it will be put into place on NHS terms and conditions. I think because of the excellent relationships created by the corporate director for commissioning and the excellent platform that that post has created in the 12 months tenure of that role, the proposal is to seek approval to the establishment of that new post of director, and also seeks to appoint the former corporate director into that role on a sort of a 0.6 full-time equivalent basis at the remuneration level proposed in the report, again, which is on NHS terms and conditions. So I think I've already mentioned as well, we want to create a permanent corporate director role for the adult services. I think it recognises the fact that, you know, we absolutely need to have a dedicated corporate director just for that portfolio. It will also take on into that portfolio the public health function, and commissioning team will move back into that portfolio. And the proposal there is to regrade the post to be commensurate with its corporate leadership team peers at 116,745. So the post for corporate director adults has been covered on an interim basis for the last 11 months. So the proposal here is that an internal member-led recruitment process is undertaken, and that candidate who's been undertaking the role for 11 months on a temporary basis is interviewed for that position. Okay, so I've mentioned the public health function will transfer into that portfolio. So on another part of the proposal is to, again, create the Director of Public Health, which again is another statutory role, put that on a permanent footing, and regrade that post to a salary level of 95,000. This is following some benchmarking information with comparable posts in Greater Manchester and advice provided by Public Health England. It's been covered on a temporary basis again for a number of years, and the proposal here is to include the post holder in the interview process following an external advertisement process. Again, it will be a member-led appointment process with Public Health England, who will support and advise on that process. So the third part of the proposal is to create a permanent post for corporate director for children and families, and to set the remuneration level for that post. Again, we've done some benchmarking, and in order to attract a suitable, experienced and qualified person to undertake that role, we're looking to set the remuneration level equivalent to £125,000. I think it's essential we have a separate corporate director of children's services role on a permanent basis, you know, to ensure that we've got the sufficient focus and expertise to return the council back to an Ofsted good outcome position at really the earliest opportunity that we can do. And as I said, I think we've done some benchmarking across the piece, and that salary level is what, you know, the information is telling us. So we've got an interim director of children's services in post currently, as expertise in this field at the moment is at a premium. So prior to recruiting to the permanent vacancy, we're seeking approval to sustain that position kind of going forward. So, you know, it's important that, you know, we do have a leader to lead that improvement journey. So for the corporate director permanent appointment for the children's services role, we're proposing an external advertisement process. Again, it's a member-led appointment. And as soon as we've got council approval, hopefully we've got employment committee approval first, and then council approval will kind of put the mechanisms in place to do that. So in summary, you've seen the recommendations. You know, the proposals contained in this report represent, I suppose, the first phase of change, because, you know, the work is ongoing to plan for the next the next 3 years. You know, we've got some significant financial challenges. I think that we need to consider how we kind of fundamentally reshape our services. You know, if our ambitions for the corporate plan are to be, you know, realised. So, you know, I think and the report suggests that such reshaping will in all probability require further changes to come in the next kind of 12 months. So again, I'm not going to read out the recommendations. I think I've covered them in the summary, but the proposal is to recommend the changes to council for approving or noting as appropriate.
Councillor Acton.
Yeah, just briefly, just to say that I fully support the recommendations within the report. I think the proposals will strengthen and develop a more stable leadership. I think obviously we have been carrying, interim directors, and I think the time is absolutely right to establish a new leadership team where all of them are substantial posts, and with that, I support the proposals, and I would like to move that we accept them.
Does anybody else want to comment on the proposals as laid out? Councillor Cordingley.
The only slight worry I have is less about the major changes, but it's more about the relationship between council and CCG. We were at a position where they were almost merging at one time, and now they seem to have been pulled apart, but we're left with some legacy links that are not tidy by any definition. And I'm just wondering, how does it, so we've got the director, the corporate director for finance is still part corporate director for finance and the CCG. We've got this new post that's being created that actually, at least the corporate director on finance has got company now in terms of cross responsibility, but it's a strange relationship. I don't know where it's going in future. At the moment, it's sort of tidying up what we've got, but it feels almost we've got to decide whether we do have that shared responsibility, or further down the line, is it going to change again?
Could I say, I think the role that this director will have integrating health and social care, because the system won't work unless there is that integration, and we just need to keep a careful eye that that is working and that the teams know what to expect from this role, because I think it is important going forward.
And just to add to that, absolutely, the role of the new Director for Integrated Health and Social Care Strategy one of the responsibilities is a focus on the development of the whole system reform plan for health and social care. So I think, whilst the two organisations are statutory, individual organisations, there is absolutely the focus and the intention is to maintain those excellent kind of relationships built in the system to further develop the joint commissioning intentions, and that is absolutely without question the plan going forward.
Councillor Thompson.
I just want to say that I do support the adult and children's service being separated. I think it will make them stronger. But I just wondered, what impact does that have on the workforce? Did the workforce work in two separate areas, or did they merge when the directorate merged, and what impacts will it have on their structures?
So the arrangements have been in place for over 12 months now, so on an interim basis. So what we're doing now is we're formalising, those interim arrangements. So it's really important that the two corporate directors work really closely together, in terms of progressing those, those areas where, both services kind of need to work on a joint basis. So I think the workforce have been used to working in this way, as I say, for the kind of structure has evolved over the last 12 months and will continue to evolve. And obviously we'll keep it under further review once these proposals have kind of gone forward. I think it's really key that, that we do that.
Anybody got anything else they want to raise? No. Can I recommend then that the proposals as laid out are noted and those necessary to go to council are put to council on the 17th? Thank you. Can we just have a brief overview on the agency spend, as we did do this in depth at the last meeting?
This is the end of year report for agency spend, and we have had already quite a detailed discussion on agency spend. I think the highlights from this report is to say that we do have a very robust vacancy clearance process wrapped around all of our recruitment process to ensure that agency cover is almost a last resort. The agency spend for this year, for last year, sorry, has increased. But I think, when we look into some of the detail kind of going further forward, the directorate breakdown is showing us that actually over the last few months, the directorate spend is actually reducing. So I think, again, we've talked earlier around some of the reasons for that agency spend, and in the main, it is predominantly in the adults and the children's directorates where, we need to make sure that we've got the ratios of workers to clients and there are no gaps in service provision. I will go on to say that, all of our agency spend is within employee kind of staffing budgets, and we are always monitoring spend on a kind of a monthly basis to ensure that where there are some unusual trends, we understand kind of why they are there, and in the main we are as I say doing our best to ensure that at all times we have a workforce that is a substantive workforce, but as we've already discussed, there will be times when we need to call into place some agency short-term temporary cover, but what we're trying to do now is to make sure that is short-term, and other things are put in place to mitigate that.
Thank you. The next item is the workforce update. Again, we have discussed this in quite great length at the last meeting, so just a brief overview, please.
Yeah, I think this is again where we just want to kind of bring some information to Employment Committee to show all of the work, or some of the work, that the HR service is doing to support the organisation. I think it's really important that we bring our sort of new values to life. And we're doing that through a range of sort of workforce policies and processes. So we talked about our new appraisal process that will be underpinned by the new kind of values and our behaviour framework. Because again, I think it's really important that we all work with those, and they are at the centre of everything that we do. I think it's really important, again, that we start to have, or we continue to have, kind of regular conversations with our workforce. So again, the appraisal process will focus very much on an ongoing conversation rather than a once a year, twice a year kind of meeting and a piece of paper that can't say kind of sits on a shelf anymore, because I don't think we have many shelves, but it kind of filed in a computer system, and we kind of get it out, and what did we discuss, and so our approach is very much around having that ongoing dialogue so that we can, you know, really start to get to know our workforce in as much detail as possible. Talked about the revised health and wellbeing strategy, again, Epic You, which is helping to support our workforce to bring their best healthy self to work, and that's kind of focused on emotional and physical kind of health and well-being, because again I think it's really important that we promote that across you know, as kind of leaders in this organisation. It's really important that we role model these values. I talked a bit about kind of some of the work that we've done. We're going to be launching an employee survey to understand a bit more about how what our workforce think about working for Trafford, and just to start to make some improvements from feedback that we'll get through that process. And I also talked about, you know, some of the groups that we've got in place at the moment, again, to support our workforce, one of which is around our carers working group, which I think is really popular. And that's an opportunity for people to kind of get together and share their experiences, and also support each other and provide some really good information to help them, you know, kind of to balance their kind of caring responsibilities and kind of get that work-life balance. And I also mentioned, you know, some of the work that we're doing around rolling out the Trafford Way development programme, where this is a system-wide kind of development programme where we've held quite significant, you know, numbers of interventions kind of over the last kind of 18 months. So again, I think, you know, there's a lot of really positive things happening kind of in the workforce. We've reached our apprenticeship targets, and we are joint first with Wigan. So I'm pleased to say that, you know, for Trafford, that's a really significant kind of milestone, really. So we, you know, we use the apprenticeship levy to support existing staff to get qualifications and additional skills, and we have some new entrants into the organisation. So we've got quite a good cohort of young people, and we're doing some work with our care leaver cohort as well, to encourage them to have a work experience and to you know, try to see what it's like to work for a local authority. So again, lots of really good, really positive things happening at the moment.
Thank you. Excellent news about the apprenticeship scheme, and I hope it continues. I haven't been informed of any other. Tom? Sorry. I'll repeat, congratulations on the apprenticeship scheme, and I hope it continues. I haven't been informed of any other urgent business, so I would declare the meeting closed. Thank you for your attendance.